Welcome back to Mafia, and in this Audio Boom original podcast series, we explore America's criminal underworld to reveal the lives and careers of its greatest gangsters. Our sponsor is ZipRecruiter. This series has been extensively researched and produced in consultation with experts, authors, and those who were actually there.
Joe Pistone, a fantastic FBI agent, a real hero, and should be seen as a hero by the American public. Someone who actually put his life on hold to really get to the root of a segment of organized crime in the United States, and put his life on the line, really.
Special Agent Joe Pistone spent 6 years deep undercover in the mob. To them, he was known as Donnie Brasco.
Every day going to work like that, knowing he could easily be made or betrayed, and his life would have been worthless. And yet he did it for years.
It was the most successful undercover operation in the FBI's history. Thanks to him, more than 200 mobsters would be convicted, and one of the biggest mafia families brought down.
Did I want to see him get killed? No. Would I rather have him gone to jail? Yeah.
Joe Pistone, a.k.a. Donnie Brasco, in his own words. This is Mafia.
I'm Joseph Pistone. Was an FBI agent, 27 years. And I worked a lot of those years undercover, and I attempted to infiltrate the mafia in New York City. And using the name Donnie Brasco, I was able to infiltrate the Bonanno crime family in New York City. Before that, I had infiltrated the portion of the Colombo mafia family, and then I spent almost 6 years in that undercover operation.
In the 1970s, penetrating the mob hierarchy with an undercover agent was considered too difficult and too dangerous.
Going back years ago, you didn't have that many informants in the mafia. You didn't really have an infiltration of the mafia. So you might have gotten a bit of information that so-and-so is doing this. Well, you had to go from square one. You had to either start off with following them, trying to establish their associations. We would check their telephones, who they're calling, get enough probable cause to do a wiretap. And people don't realize that it's so difficult to get a wiretap. It's you have to show that you've tried every other type of enforcement method. And from there, you would build your case. You would build your conspiracy case. And every now and then you got lucky and you saw a deal go down. And it wasn't until the late 70s. So they didn't have the stereotype like Joe Pistone, who were Italian Americans, who understood the street.
Well, we had used undercover tactics against a lot of organizations, and in a lot of different investigations. We didn't use it too much against the mafia, other than gambling cases, because we didn't think we could really infiltrate them.
Pistone's operation would one day bring the mafia to its knees, but it began modestly in 1976 as New York endured a wave of truck hijackings.
And all hijackings in New York were controlled by the mafia, one mafia family or another. Back in the day, back then, truck hijacking is be a 40-foot trailer loaded with pharmaceuticals, any kind of high-end commodity, and these loads were sometimes worth $200,000-$300,000, and the mob guys would hijack the truck, stick the truck up, take it, and then sell it to fences. And then the fences would sell it either to the public or to legitimate stores. If I could infiltrate the fences, then hopefully I could get back to the hijackers, the mafia hijackers. And that was the original premise of the undercover operation. It was to target the fences that were involved with the mafia.
Seasoned undercover agent Joe Pistone volunteered for the operation.
I always worked undercover cases. I worked all criminal matters, bank robberies, prostitution cases, worked a lot of gambling cases. It's best to use an undercover agent versus an informant for several reasons. One of the reasons is the undercover agent is on your side. You know, he's a law enforcement guy versus an informant. That's an informant for a specific reason, either getting paid, he has a beef against the people that he's informant on. With an undercover agent, you're getting somebody that basically, again, is a law enforcement agent. He's trustworthy in court. He knows what evidence to look for. And he doesn't have any axe to grind with the gangsters as an informant may have.
After the break.
Whether you're working at a startup, a family-owned business, or a multinational corporation, hiring the right people can be a real challenge. Every business needs great people, and a better way to find them. Something better than just posting a job online and praying that the right person will see it. Well, now ZipRecruiter is here to help. ZipRecruiter learns what you're looking for, identifies people with the right experience, and invites them to apply to your job. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just one day. The right candidates are out there. ZipRecruiter is how you find them. Right now, Mafia listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, for free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/mafia. That's ZipRecruiter.com/MAFIA. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
Pistone grew up in an Italian-American family in Paterson, New Jersey, giving him a good understanding of the world he was entering.
Yeah, as an Italian-American, you're always aware of the mafia, whether it's New Jersey or wherever you are. But where I grew up, New Jersey's heavily not infiltrated, but heavily concentrated mafia members in a lot of parts of New Jersey. Growing up in a neighborhood, you always know who the mob guys are in the neighborhood, but, you know, my family's situation was, you keep away from those guys, on a daily basis you see them, but it's, don't get involved with them. After high school, I went to college, got out of college, and went into naval intelligence. Spent a couple years in naval intelligence, and then applied for a position with the FBI. Became an FBI agent. Did my 16 weeks at training school, and my first assignment was at Jacksonville, Florida, where I worked all criminal matters, bank robberies, prostitution cases, worked a lot of gambling cases, worked fugitives. From Jacksonville, I got transferred to Alexandria, Virginia. From there, I got transferred to New York City.
Pistone found working undercover came naturally to him.
I think I was suited for undercover work and was successful at it because I just thought of it as another part of my job. To me, it was just another form of conducting an investigation. It just so happens it was an undercover investigation. And also, I had no personal vendettas against the people that I was trying to infiltrate. To me, they were, crooks, gangsters. I was an FBI agent. It was my job to attempt to infiltrate you, gather evidence, and hopefully bring you to trial and put you in jail. To me, it made no difference that you were a gangster. And I think that's why one of the reasons I was successful was I was comfortable in the role. And I wasn't there for any other reason.
But as former FBI Assistant Director and Special Ops Agent James Kallstrom explains, when running an undercover op, the stakes are always high.
History is legend with people undercover that, that maybe stayed too long or didn't have enough supervision, or it's very risky business. It's risky business for the undercover. It's risky business for the FBI. And it's risky business for our way of law, quite frankly, if not supervised properly. So,
to infiltrate New York's underworld, Pistone would need a whole new persona and backstory.
We came up with burglar and jewel thief because when you're in an undercover situation, you can't become involved in any violence, crime of violence. So you come up with a legend that doesn't tend to lead toward violence. Not many jewel thieves in jail for murder, you know. So I went to school, learned all about jewelry, precious gems, the locks, alarms, safes. So we took about 6-7 months to prepare for this operation.
Every aspect of his cover story was meticulously researched and rehearsed.
When you go undercover, you have to know your enemy. You have to know who you're dealing with. And knowing that it was the mafia, I knew that if I did get close with people, you know, I eventually would have to tell them about some of my background. And if I got close enough, I would have to bring somebody around. So part of my legend was I was an orphan. And I grew up in an orphanage, left the orphanage when I was 15, 16. And what we also did, we found an orphanage that had been burnt down and all the records destroyed, so nobody can go back and check the records.
In 1976, Joe Pistone left FBI headquarters with a new identity, Donald Brasco.
I came up with the name Donnie Brasco. I had used it in the operation that I had just come off of for a year and a half. So I had a lot of background as Donnie Brasco, and as far as driver's license, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kept the undercover name Donnie Brasco.
As far as the FBI's records were concerned, Special Agent Joe Pistone didn't exist.
When I first hit the streets, I was taken off the rolls of the New York City office of the FBI. So if anybody called looking for me, they'd say, we don't have any agent by that name.
Pistone left his wife and children behind in New Jersey. He didn't know he wouldn't resurface for over 6 years. His first job would be to find a way in.
You don't just walk into a mafia place and say, hey, I'm Donnie Brasco, jewel thief. I want to start doing business with you. It doesn't work that way. So, you know, they knew that you had to get your face seen. You had to have individuals be comfortable with you being in the restaurant or the bar. The plan was we had certain bars and restaurants that we knew these guys hung out in. And the idea was for me to frequent these places and get my face seen, get known, and hopefully become engaged in conversation.
It would take months until people trusted the new face as a local.
Well, the first 6 months I would just hit these different restaurants. Some were on the Upper East Side, some were down in Little Italy. I mean, they were basically all in Manhattan. I would just go in, sit at the bar, eat at the bar all the time, order a meal at the bar, order a drink at the bar, and just hang around for a couple hours and stagger my visits as far as time and day. You can't form a pattern. You can't go into the same place the same day at the same time. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's not a 5-day-a-week job. It's a 7-day-a-week job. Do that all day, go back out about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night to maybe 2, 3 next morning.
For Pistone, the work was slow, repetitive, and lonely.
Well, basically what you have is what a contact agent, which in overseas they're called minders, and that's who you keep contact with. And I would keep contact with my contact agent maybe once a week via telephone, meet him once a month, and report anything that I would, any important information I had. For the first 6 months, I didn't have much conversation with anybody of any consequence, so the reports were kind of thin. Did I enjoy it? I endured it. I put it that way. I endured it. I'm not really a bar guy. I don't drink. I mean, I'll drink one beer, maybe one glass of wine. I wasn't in love with being an undercover agent. To me, it was part of my job.
Finally, after months of watching and waiting, Pistone had become familiar with a bartender who he suspected had criminal connections.
I finally, one day, got into a conversation with a bartender who was a knockaround guy. And he started talking to me, and there was nothing other than, sports, what's going on, in the city, et cetera, but nothing illegal. And I finally felt, well, I got to make a move here. come in one night and, hey, Donnie, how you doing? Okay. We start talking, and he said, you going to be around tonight? I said, yeah. So he says, you want to, we're going out? I said, yeah. So I had a package of diamonds, and I had them in an envelope. So I said, hey, Charlie, I said, I took the envelope out of my pocket, put it on a bar, and I said, I need X amount of money for these. I forget what it was, say $10,000. And that's another thing, as an undercover, you got to know what the street price of stuff is we call swag. The difference of buying these diamonds at Tiffany's than buying off somebody in the street. And he didn't say a word, he just picked it up, put it in his pocket.
Days went by, and despite regular visits back to the bar, the package was never mentioned.
A couple weeks go by, and I didn't say anything to him as far as, were you able to move that? And he didn't say anything to me. Then after about 2 weeks, I come in one night, and he says, somebody left this for you. It's an envelope. I pick it up, put it in my pocket. We go out, do what we do, go out bouncing. I go back to the apartment that night, and the money's in there. So now he knows that, I don't have to spell it out to him that I'm a jewel thief, And it went from there.
Pistone had taken the first step in establishing his credibility as the criminal Donnie Brasco. There's more to the story after the break.
From the creators of Missing Mara Murray and Crawl Space comes Empty Frames, a new podcast investigating one of the biggest mysteries the world has ever seen. In the early morning hours of March 18, 1990, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts, was the scene of one of the most audacious art heists in history. In 81 minutes, two thieves dressed as policemen made off with 13 pieces of artwork with an estimated value of $500 million. Works by Vermeer, Degas, and Rembrandt were stripped from their frames, never to be seen again. Vermeer's The Concert was one of those paintings and is considered to be the most valuable stolen property in the world. Deep within the criminal underground, theories of the painting's whereabouts and the identities of the thieves are abundant. Empty Frames explores all the angles of the case with insights from investigators, reporters, and art theft experts. Subscribe to Empty Frames today on Apple Podcasts or wherever good podcasts are found.
Over the next few months, the bartender started to invite Donnie out.
And the places we went to were all after-hours joints, gambling. And he would introduce me, just as Donnie.
Pistone was slowly making progress simply by hanging out, gambling, and playing backgammon.
I had played some backgammon before the operation, but in one of the places I hung around in, the guys would play backgammon on a bar, for money. Once they became comfortable with me, I was able to get into backgammon games. And actually, at the time, I wasn't too bad at it. I was pretty good, and I used to beat them most of the time. Yeah, and it was a good entree because you're not talking about illegal activities, and that's another thing too. When you're an undercover agent, you got to be a real person. If an undercover goes in and all they want to do is talk about illegal activities, that's a red flag. There's something going on here,
One of Pistone's new contacts was a man known as Jilly. Not only was Jilly a fence and a truck hijacker, he was also what the mafia called a made man.
Made, straightened out, good fellow, wise guy. All those terms mean the same thing. You've been officially inducted into a particular mafia family. When I got introduced to a fellow by the name of Jilly, he was a Colombo out of Brooklyn, and he had a crew, and they were pretty good thieves, actually. Kind of switched the focus because Jilly was a made guy. What are we going after why are we still focusing on the fences? Because I bypassed the fences and got to the made guys.
The FBI saw the potential for going after bigger fish than just the fences. But as they aimed for the criminals higher up the chain, they were well aware that things would only get more difficult and more dangerous for Joe Pistone. Former FBI Assistant Director and Special Ops Agent James Colstrom.
Being undercover is a very tricky business. It's very tricky business. And I think a lesser agency would not do it because you can have a lot of things go wrong. You can get undercover agents to get too familiar. They get sucked in too far. They get involved in some, felonies that are going to take place, and they can't get out in time to report them. So it is tricky business. So you're always weighing, the undercover's operations and information against a larger picture. But Joe was a master at that, and Joe was a cool, calm, collected guy.
In spite of the risk, the FBI encouraged Pistone to get in with Gilly and his crew.
You have to be an earner, They're not taking me in because they like my looks, You have to see that I have the ability to make money.
To convince them, Pistone would need a lot more jewelry to be the spoils from his supposed robberies.
In the operation, as a jewel thief, I wasn't going out robbing Tiffany's to get the jewels. Any jewelry that I brought around came from the FBI that we got from U.S. Customs. There was jewelry that was confiscated, and like other times I would bring around watches. Any monies that I got, I would turn it into the FBI.
It worked. Pistone's mob contacts were convinced he was a prolific and skilled thief. But when a pair of gangsters asked for Donnie Brasco's help in their own robberies, breaking into homes, FBI agent Joe Pistone had to refuse.
I had a problem with two guys that were in his crew. There were two guys in his crew that just got out of prison. And being to get out of prison, they wanted to make money. So they had some scores lined up. And we went to look at the scores, and I would, they'd ask me, can you get by this alarm? Can you get in, And a couple times I said, no, I can't bypass that alarm system. I can't get into this place. I can't do this safe. And they got mad.
Suddenly, Pistone was in a very risky situation. The two men were dangerous, and his refusal cast doubt on his cover.
So I get to the club one day, and Gilly says, Donnie, we got to take a walk. I said, what's the matter? He said, well, Patsy and Frankie they're kind of ticked because you turned down these scores and, for them to make money. And I said, Gilly, what do you want from me? I can't do everything. So I said, well, they want to have a sit down. I said, all right. So we go in the club, go in the back room. They lock the door. Patsy puts his gun on the table, and he said, Donnie, he said, unless you convince me that you're a really great jewel thief, he said, the only way you're going out of here is rolled up in that rug,
They began to question Pistone on every detail of his past.
So we were in there for like 5.5 hours, where you from, who did you know, what'd you do, because I said I was from Miami.
Eventually, Gilly called a halt to the meeting.
And after about 5 hours, finally, Gilly says, hey, it's over. Donnie's been around us for 4 months, 5 months, and he's a good guy. We know what he can do.
But just as Frankie and Patsy were backing down, Pistone decided to take a massive gamble to increase his credibility.
Now I got a problem. Because on the street, you got two things. You got your respect and your credibility. You can't lose your respect and you can't lose your credibility. And my problem is I can't go over and shake Patsy's hand and say, all's forgiven. I've realized that, because why isn't Donnie mad? They just called him out. If somebody calls you out in the street, you got to be mad. And the only thing they're going to understand here is some kind of force. One guy was a made guy. Patsy was a made guy. And there's this thing in the mafia. The mafia has certain rules. One of the rules is you can't hit a made guy under any circumstances. That's a penalty of death. So we get up, and as we're walking out, I hit Frankie because he's not a made guy. Because I got to show some kind of that I'm really mad and some kind of violent force. And Patsy jumps on me. He starts punching me, starts beating me. But I can't do anything because he's a made guy, so I just keep hitting Frankie. Then finally they break it up.
Pistone's risk paid off. Not only did it give him credibility, it gave him the excuse to distance himself from the increasing violence of Gilly's crew.
I went to Jilly and I said, Jilly, all due respect, but I don't want to be involved with these guys anymore. If they have something lined up, they have a score lined up, they have something they want to rob lined up, don't even tell me about it. I don't even want to know about it.
Convinced Pistone was the real deal, Gilly introduced him to major figures from another mob family, the Bonanos.
Joe Bonanno was the boss of it, the godfather of the family. And then he left in the, probably the late 60s. He had kind of a problem, so he kind of went out to Arizona. And the family was taken over by Carmine Galenti. And Galenti was a big drug importer. And he was at one time the underboss of the family, and then he became the boss of the family. But there were a couple other bosses after Bonanno left. When I infiltrated the Bonanos, Carmine Galenti was the boss. But they were a major force in New York City as far as a mafia family. Well, in the 70s, mid-70s, well, the FBI, I mean, we knew the structures of the different mafia families through informant information and, of course, through investigation. But we didn't know was the extent that the mafia, that the Bonanno family actually, connection they had with the Sicilian mafia.
Pistone was first introduced to a Bonanno family soldier named Tony Mira. A man with unpredictable mood swings, Tony had a reputation as a ruthless killer, thought to have murdered up to 40 people.
Tony Mira was a major drug dealer in the Bonanno family. He had just gotten out of jail not long before I met him. The guy was just one mean guy. Mira was just plain mean. I mean, nobody liked him. I mean, even the wise guys didn't like him. I mean, his own nephew killed him, so what does that tell you? He was the type of guy, he just abused everybody, but he made tons of money for the family through his drug dealings.
Mira, in turn, introduced Pistone to another Bonanno soldier, Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero, a hitman with a reputed 23 killings to his name.
Lefty Ruggiero was what I would call 24-hour gangster. I mean, the guy he was on being a gangster every minute of the day.
Lefty would prove invaluable to Pistone's operation.
He was a great historian as far as knowledge of the mafia, how it worked and how it would work. And I gained a lot of valuable information from him regarding the inner workings of the families.
Pistone began to build on his relationship with the two men, and especially Lefty Ruggiero.
When I first, got introduced to Lefty and Mira, they were downtown guys, Little Italy guys, Monroe Street, Mulberry Street, basically where I would hang out with Lefty and Mira every day. And the captain at the time was a guy by the name of Mike Sabella, who owned a restaurant on Mulberry and Hester, Casabella. So we used to hang out at the restaurant a lot of the times. Lefty was had a bookmaking operation going. Lefty and I, and when I became really close with him, I helped him in his bookmaking operation. I became really close with Lefty. I became close with two of his daughters. Became close with his second wife, who I actually was best man at his wedding. And I used to spend a lot of time at Lefty's apartment with him because he was a great cook.
Through Mira and Lefty Ruggiero, Pistone was able to reveal the inner workings of a mafia family, something that the FBI, until then, had known surprisingly little about. James Kallstrom.
Joe Pistone gathered, the very bread and butter of the organized crime family he was involved in. He sat in their meetings. He could recount the power structure. He could recount to us who was in, who was out. He could recount what rackets they were involved in. He could recount what's coming up in the future. The people he was involved in were particularly vicious. You know, who was going to kill who, or who was on the outs, or, you know, he was right at the very seat of that organized crime family. So he knew everything that was going on, pretty much.
In 1978, Tony Mira was sent to prison for drug trafficking, and Pistone went to work exclusively for Lefty Ruggiero. Lefty was part of a crew run by one of the most powerful captains in the Bonanno family, Dominic "Sonny Black" Napolitano. Selwyn Rabb is a mafia expert and author of 5 Families.
Salvatore Sonny Black, better known as Sonny Black Napolitano, was an important capo in the Bonanno family in the 1980s and late 1970s. He had worked his way up the hard way. He was a killer. He'd made his bones by killing. He was a good earner. Now, an earner is very important in crime families. It means they bring in money for the bosses. Sonny Black had been an effective and important leader, a capo. He had about 15 to 20 members in his crew, about 10 or 12 made guys, and probably at least 20 or 30 other, well, known as associates or wannabes, who hang around and work with the family. And he operated out of a section of Brooklyn. He dressed effectively like the consummate or quintessential mobster. T-shirts, dark suits, heavy on jewelry, rings, pinky rings, swaggered, talk tough.
Pistone was now hanging out daily with Sonny Black at his social club, the Motion Lounge in Brooklyn.
The average day in the life of a wise guy is not as exciting as you might think. And you might meet up at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. You hang out at the social club all day, and your conversation is about what you're going to rob, what you're going to steal, who's stealing from you, how much money you're making in this operation, how much money you're making in that operation. It's a steady grind every day.
But life at the Motion Lounge did have its surprises.
Somebody had given Lefty a cub, a small lion cub, and we kept it at the Motion Lounge and used to feed it every day. But then it became a lion. And Sonny's brother-in-law had a warehouse. And every day we buy steaks and go feed the lion the steaks. And then it just got too big, It was a lion, and it was wrecking the warehouse. So he said, what the hell are we going to do with this lion? We got to get rid of this lion. So they got a wrangler. So they decided they were going to take it to one of the parks in Brooklyn and tie it up so the cops would come and get it. So they did, and they chained him, actually. They chained him to a tree, and they called the precinct, and the watch commander thought they were just drunks calling, and they never did anything. So finally they got a couple, gave them $100. So they went to the precinct and said, hey, we're walking through the park, and we saw this lion chained to a tree, what's going on? So they sent out the people, and they grabbed the lion and took it out. But that lion used to eat a lot of steaks every day.
Pistone had now achieved what most thought impossible. The FBI had an agent as an active member in a major crew in the New York Mafia.
There was a lot of excitement because even up to this point, nobody had infiltrated to the point that they were running around with made guys in any family. I was living with these guys. I mean, this wasn't where I'd spend 8 to 5 with these guys, and then my whole existence was now with the Mafia. I wasn't seeing my contact agent that much because of how far I had infiltrated. So any information that I had, I would just regurgitate over telephone to my contact agent, and then he would reduce it down to writing.
Pistone was so deep undercover that he was practically on his own.
I had none in my apartment other than how I would record the telephone conversations with the suction cup on the recorder, so that I could take and hide in the car somewhere. And that's why I didn't wear recordings when I got to this stage, because again, at times I would stay at Sonny's apartment. I had nowhere to put a recorder, you know. Again, most of my recordings were by a telephone or a mini cassette, which I could leave somewhere for my contact agent to pick up. Well, most of the time I had no surveillance team when I was in New York, because you can't sit on anybody in Brooklyn or Little Italy. There was a surveillance team in the area, but most of the time I was just on my own in New York. I wasn't running around with guys following me.
Despite the great risks, Pistone revealed an extraordinary amount of evidence on most aspects of the Mafia's dealings.
Well, at this stage I was gathering a lot of intelligence information, but I also was gathering evidence on drug deals, gathering evidence on illegal activities as far as extortion, as far as different contracting businesses that they were, extorting money from, hijacking, political, corruption. So it was a myriad of information.
By working with Lefty, he was able to give the FBI names of high-ranking captains and bosses.
I was finding out who the upper echelons, the structure of the family, who was basically running the family. So a lot of it had to do with intelligence information that we didn't know by doing investigations, and that we weren't getting from informants. We showed that we can go after and get the upper echelon versus the guys on the bottom doing all the dirty work.
Pistone's intelligence was enabling the FBI to build a much clearer picture of not just how the Bonanno family was run, but the whole mafia. Jim Kostler was an FBI coordinating supervisor for organized crime.
The way this came about was this. When one of the things we did was that I required everybody, all the supervisors involved in these organized crime cases and their case agents and whoever they wanted to come to a meeting every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. You must be there. And you must be willing to discuss what has taken place in your investigation for the past week. And we would do this for 2-3 hours at a time. At first everyone grumbled, I'm too busy, I can't do that. But as time went on, and as we focused on the hierarchy of these individual families, these folks would come and they would talk about these investigations, and the other supervisors say, you're talking about that, I had somebody, my guys were talking about that too. And you came to realize that this was not a monolithic organization. These folks were working together. They might have been individual families that, for work purposes and for power purposes, but in the scheme of things, they were working together, sharing these criminal activities. So what we're developing is a picture of the 5 families sharing in these criminal activities and controlling these various unions. Now, one family might control one particular union, but they would do that to the benefit of the other families as needed.
A picture emerged of a highly organized network of crime families, while Pistone's alter ego, Donnie Brasco, was now so credible and well-respected inside the mob that he would be able to reach ever deeper into the criminal underworld. In the next episode.
Theoretically, to become a member, you would have had to kill somebody.
This is the first time everybody's carrying a gun now. Sonny Black gave me a gun to carry because guys that were with the other 3 captains were looking to kill us.
He was involved in some of the most vicious territorial wars that were going on organized crime, so he was right there at the focus point.
This has been an Audio Boom original. Thanks to ZipRecruiter for the support, and be sure to check out our new podcast, Empty Frames. Follow Mafia on Spotify, or rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your favorite shows.